So we're 16 days into this, or 15 or 16 days into this. We're halfway through practicing healthy emotions through taking every thought captive. What you'd want to have now is a few things. You'd want to have your sachet down. So at any given moment, you could sit down with yourself and you could sachet with yourself, and you give yourself just 1 minute. I feel blank because of blank, and I feel blank because of blank. There's no qualifiers. It's not I feel a little bit mad. I feel a little bit sad. I feel okay. It's giving that nuanced word from the emotions wheel by now. And you will want to be practicing with the emotions wheel, pulling that out, sitting with that. Your kids all ran in to go do something. You were really having some, that stuff bubbling up around you. You could feel it in your body. You could feel something twig up here, like just go not right. So you're going to sit with that, and you're going to fill out in the emotions will, and you'll want to become more and more descriptive of your emotions. All right, you want to become more descriptive of your emotions and what your emotions are and how to feel them. The second part is you will want to be learning the first three parts, the STE of the steer model. All right. So you'll want to find out what that emotion is, what situation you're in, the situation being reported as a news reporter. No fake news when you're doing your clear model, your steer model. All right. And then you will also want to, again, getting down your thought down to one sentence, not your belief, not your feeling, not an elaborated sentence that's repeating your emotion, but it's going to be a sentence of a thought. Okay. And you want to be very precise in that thought also, as precise as you can. And you want to follow that thought. We'll work on this next week. That's the last week. We'll work on it a lot more because I'll have a whiteboard, and I'll be able to work through that a lot more on STE and then add the ER. So that's another thing you want. That's the second thing you'd want. The third thing you'd want, we mentioned it on Facebook about reading through Psalm, and you'd be amazed. I mean, Linda Downey's done a great job talking about the Psalms on the Facebook group. So you want to go through and look at some of what she's written, read some of the stuff she's putting down there. We'll have more of that at the end of this week. In a couple days, we'll have more on the Psalm. All right. So that's another thing you will want. And this week, you're going to want to put some of that into practice. Okay. The clear model, the C. Keep calling it the clear model. That actually is a great. I really like that, but it's the steer model, STEER model of self coaching. Okay, and it's a take every thought captive model. So what I want to talk about, that's my intro there. What I want to talk about is hallucinations. Now your brain is a predicting machine. We've talked about that. Your brain sits in this, it's encased in a black box called your skull. The only way it gets information is through the five senses. We also would say, as Christians, we get a sixth sense, or the Holy Spirit, the Spirit of God speaking to us. But that's all the information it knows, and it's constantly predicting what's going to happen. And when it doesn't get what it wants, then it has to recalibrate, and it also causes a lot of disappointment, that predicting machine. So I have a great example the other day. We were at Layson Volcanic National Park outside of Redding, where we're at. Took a drive up there, and we were eating at the cafe, and I got a BLT. And in my mind, a BLT meant, four or five good thick pieces of bacon on that crispy bacon, more bacon than tomato and lettuce for sure, on some really good bread. Well, I got the sandwich, and I bit into it. I mean, it's really good bread, lettuce and tomato. I bit into it, and it was microwave uh, bacon, and about three small pieces, kind of the pieces you pull up and you can like read through them. And my brain went through this whole thing of like disappointment and ungrateful. And I had to like recalibrate. Wait, I'm going to enjoy this sandwich. The bread and lettuce and tomato. The bread was awesome. The lettuce and tomato was super fresh. It was just the disappointing bacon in that. So you've done this before. If you've ever picked up a bottle of, you thought somebody was drinking water and they're drinking Sprite. You take a big gulp, you're like, oh, you might like Sprite, but your brain is predicting what that drink's going to taste like. Your brain is predicting that. So if somebody has a Diet Coke and you go to drink it, but they've put bourbon in their Diet Coke, or they put alcohol in their Diet Coke, you're going to drink that and go, oh, and you might like both of them again, but your brain's predicting That's why we talk about, blindfold taste test and things like that. That's why so many people don't know the difference of things when they taste it, even though in life they're like, that tastes exactly like Coke. That tastes exactly like Pepsi. I can know. But over and over, people fail that experiment because just walking into a mall, taking a test, you can't see anything. You just know it's two colas. It's your brain is a big part of what you smell, what you actually visually see. Okay. And this is called a hallucination. When you predict that this is going to be water and it's not water, you hallucinate at what you saw there. Okay. You've done this also before. You started off with a well, I'll give you another example. I was snorkeling off the coast of the Florida Panhandle. I was, these are my flippers, so it should be backwards. I was going forwards. I was snorkeling, and I can dive. I can't probably anymore. I don't even know if I try. And I thought I see a flounder down, which is kind of cool. Okay, and they flounder into that sea bottom, and they get kind of covered. And I saw a little movement, so I breathe. I always blow out a little bit, then I breathe in, and I start my dive. I kick my flippers. I go down. As I got to the bottom, kind of, you're reaching out for it. What I thought was a flounder, I realized it was a stingray. Not a big stingray, one of those like the dirty brown stingrays in the Gulf of Mexico. And I immediately, of course, I jerk back and I'm using all my force of my flippers and my arms, and I feel real awkward. And I shoot to the top, and I admit it rattled me. It was a hallucination. I was sure I was going to go down and disturb a flounder, a fish. And instead, I was the one that got disturbed. And it's super normal. We're constantly hallucinating. We're constantly predicting incorrectly what the five senses are picking up because we're basing it on our memory and what we have stored in here and what we've thought about and what we felt in our bodies during those times. It's our normal method of operating. So here's another example of hallucinating. You see someone and you go, hey, Joe. And you're like, oh, that's not Joe. I had a guy in church, a turnaround, man. He came in and he just like, oh my God, it's so good. What are you doing here? And he shook my hand. I said, hey, how are you? And he shook my hand. He goes, I'll talk to you later. I'm like, okay. And he turned around, and then after the music portion, he's like, I'm so sorry. I thought I knew you. I thought you were somebody from work. And it was like, I'm okay with that. But he hallucinated. And at some time, your hallucination switches when you realize that what it is that you were hallucinating. Okay. Again, we're constantly hallucinating. We're constantly predicting incorrectly what our kids' motives are. We're constantly predicting incorrectly what our husbands or our wives' motives are because our brain has in here stored how they're going to respond. So often we actually predict how they're going to respond. So we respond to them according to what we're predicting, not according to what they're actually doing. That's why sometimes we can be very short with people, or we can cut things off, or we can go ahead straight to a stricter discipline than we would have, or a stricter conversation or stricter tone, because we're predicting and we're jumping the gun. We're not even letting them act out what they would want to do. Okay. So I just find that super interesting. I want to go back to that disappointment when you go for a Coca-Cola and then you go to drink somebody's Coca-Cola and it's got bourbon or it's got alcohol and you're like, oh, so your prediction is proven false. Okay. And you can say from that point on, I do not like Coca-Cola ever. All right. And that's predicting based on that's not the best way to go about with your predictions. You start adjusting. Oh, I do like Coke. I just don't like alcohol, and I'm going to keep drinking the Coke that I drink. Okay, um, and our hallucination of these false predictions constantly disappoint us and constantly like you think you're gonna have a good time on a date. You got on the date and you're not having a good time, and your brain starts looking for an excuse, and that excuse is almost always to blame the other person. So disappointment often leads to blame in these predictive models. It's because our brain loves the blame pathway or the victim pathway or the shame pathway. And a lot of us have like those pathways. We all have all of them, but some of them are worn really well. If you're always the victim, you have a really worn pathway in that brain of yours, in that physical muscle called the brain of yours. If it's always shame, well, I'm just no good. Nobody will ever want to date me. I've never gone on a date. It's like that's a shame model. Okay. Um, Let's see. How would I like to end this? Oh yeah, I think I'll end this with when the challenge is when reality is revealed, that's when maturity, that's when our ability or desire or our growth mindset comes in. Because the challenge is often when something that's revealed, it's like we don't want to believe that. We want to go ahead and keep believing what we hallucinated and seeing. And I think we see this a lot. um no. So we hallucinate what we're seeing and then we're proven wrong, but we're only proven wrong that one time. Our brain has already made up this really powerful narrative, this really powerful story over here that often just shoots down all of this reality that we're experiencing out here because of some earlier reality that we experience. We keep experiencing it over and over. And that's where we start talking about re-traumatizing ourselves by committing to a story of what happened to us 5 years, 10 years, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, keep repeating it to ourselves and to everybody. So that becomes our story, even though we haven't been physically abused. I'm just going to use that because that's a prime example. We haven't been physically abused for 20 years. We've been abusing ourselves because we keep presenting it to ourselves as if it's the truth of who I am or who the person or the type of person that abused me is. Okay. So we're the ones, a lot of people are re traumatizing themselves talking about church hurt. They got hurt in church. The pastor didn't do something they thought he would do. Maybe their brain was predicting this pastor's going to be my mentor. This pastor's going to do this for me. This pastor's going to help my marriage. This pastor's going to never, fail me. This pastor's Jesus. And so what happens when that prediction becomes false, the hallucination is revealed and we freak out and we start blaming people around us. And then we rethink it, re-traumatize ourselves over and over and over again at all different kind of levels and yeah. So that's the challenge. And Christians are to be people of a growth mindset. The growth mindset says, I can do something about it. I might not be able to change my circumstance, but I can change who I am in the circumstance. I might not be able to change the nation, but I can change the way I respond to the nation and the way I reflect the kingdom, the real nation I belong to, the real ruler of my life is Jesus Christ. All right. So when I can reflect that, and then I present that all the time outward. All right. I like this stuff. I go on and on. I probably went on too long. I didn't put a timer on this one, but God bless you. Bye.